What's up, guys? It's Psychic Greg Stanley. I wanted to sign on and make a quick video about an interesting reading I had with a client this week. So I had this girl call me and she said, "Hey Greg, I want to know if you can connect with my sister who passed away." And I said, okay. And I started to ask her. I said, "Hey, so I'm seeing the number 3. The number 3 is coming very strong. I don't know why. I don't know if she passed in March, if that's why she's showing me 3. 1, 2, 3, March." And she said, "No, but we were 3 years apart." And I said, okay. And I kept trying to connect, and all I was getting was 3. And I'm like, hey, I'm only getting this right now. I'm not getting any other information right now. And she said, "Well, my sister died during childbirth, and I was born 3 years later." And I said, okay, I'm still trying to connect. And I asked for her sister's name, and I'm just gonna say Claire. And so I was trying to connect with the name Claire to see if anything else would come through. And I said, and I finally just said to her, I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "I know why I'm not connecting with her." And I was shown that she, the client, is actually her sister reincarnated. And that's why I wasn't able to connect with Claire, because my client, which I'm going to say Becky is Claire reincarnated. And she said, "That's really interesting because I have asked several people to connect with my sister and they're unable to connect with her." And I said, yeah. And the connection that I made with her was that you are her. And I asked her, I said, "Do you feel like from the time you were born, like you are somebody else? Like your name's Becky, but you don't feel like you're her. You feel like you're somebody else. You feel like you're you're just you feel like you're out of place in a way, and you feel like your name is something else." And she said, "Greg, all I could think about, all she could remember, like for the first few years of her childhood, was she felt so close to her sister who passed away. Her parents told her that she had a sister that passed away and everything, but she just always felt a really strong connection with her, but wasn't able to communicate with her." And again, from what I saw in her reading, it was her reincarnated. And she said that makes perfect sense, because I feel like I know my name is Becky, but I don't feel like I'm Becky. I feel like I'm Claire. I feel like I'm my sister. I feel like I'm somebody else, and I and it makes sense that I would be her reincarnated. And yeah, and I had asked her, I said, "Do you have a huge fear of being poisoned, of drowning?" And she started crying, and she said, "That's how my sister died. Something happened in my mom's body, and my mom's blood became toxic, and that's what killed my sister. And they couldn't get her out in time, and she ended up pretty much drowning. I don't know how that all works, but that's what happened. They weren't able to revive her when they got her out finally." And I said, yeah. You are afraid of being poisoned because of what happened when your mom was delivering you, Claire, and you suffocated. And that's why you have that fear of being in water, because you could suffocate. You are claustrophobic in elevators and smaller spaces you won't even go near. And that's because of your fear of suffocation. And she just started bawling, and she said that's so true. And I never could figure out why I had those fears, because I've had them since I could remember. It wasn't something that was suddenly brought on when I was 15 years old, or when I was an 8 years old, when I was an 8-year-old child, anything like that. I've always had that. I'm definitely afraid of water. I'm definitely afraid of small spaces. I'm definitely afraid of not getting enough oxygen. And again, the explanation that I was able to give her was because she was Claire reincarnated, and that's why she was never really able to assume her new identity as Becky. So she's not suicidal or anything like that. She just feels like she's misplaced in a way. And when she got that information, she was finally able to fully accept herself as Becky, knowing that she came back to help heal her family because they were so broken over Claire passing. And one of her life missions, one of her purposes for being born and at this time, was to help heal her family. And that's exactly what her family feels about her, as they felt when her mom became pregnant with her that this was gonna help heal her from the traumatic situation with what happened to her sister Claire. And it's just really interesting, because sometimes when people ask, they're like, who cares about past lives? What matters is this life. Well, that's true. What matters is in the present moment. But knowing maybe one or two aspects of your most recent lifetime or a previous lifetime, it can explain why you're a certain way that didn't come about in this lifetime. It just was always that way. I'll give you an example for me. This was way before I even came out about my psychic abilities, with me being in my grandfather's church. It was fire, brimstone. You get saved or you go to hell. You burn forever unless you know Jesus Christ. There's only God, Jesus, heaven and hell, and the Holy Spirit. And if you're talking to anything that's non-physical, that isn't them, you're talking to Satan. I mean, that's what I was taught. So it was very confusing to me and very scary to me. And one example I remember of how I couldn't possibly know anything is I wouldn't have known in this lifetime. It had to be from some other lifetime or some other place. I remember I was probably about 4 years old. I was in the back seat of my mom's car, in my car seat, and there was a Catholic church right up the road from where I grew up. And my neighbors went to that church, and they were very active in that church. But all I knew was my grandfather's church, Community Bible Church in Louisville, Ohio. That's all I knew. And I didn't know anything outside of the Sunday school classes and what my grandpa would preach, and even the little bits and pieces I could understand as a kid. And I'm in the back seat of my mom's car, and it was snowing out and everything, and we went around the corner, and I said, Mom, how come we don't go into Monica and her family? How come we don't go into the church in there? And my mom said, oh, because they're Catholic. We're not Catholic. They have it all wrong. And I said, and I didn't understand what any of that meant, I just said, yeah, St. Peter's in there, Mother Mary's in there, and I started naming off these saints. And my mom said, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. She's looking at me in the rearview mirror and she goes, how do you know what's in there? And I said, I just do. And she goes, no, you don't know that. And you don't go to church there, so you wouldn't know that. I have never, at that time in my life, I had never been in a Catholic church. I had never stepped foot in a Catholic church. And I knew what was in there. And I told my mom, I said, yeah, there's Jesus on the cross. I said, there's Mother Mary, there's Saint Joseph in there. And my mom just said, stop, no, no, that's all wrong. That's all wrong. So my mom knew that was right, but she couldn't explain how I knew that. And it, at the time, probably scared her, because how would I know all these things? And she had never introduced me to anything like that. And that was because in a previous lifetime, several lifetimes, I had been a priest. In fact, I remember one lifetime, it's just a quick, maybe 1 minute flash. I can remember a couple things from some lifetimes ago. And I remember being a priest, and I believe it was in Bulgaria, because I knew it was somewhere like middle of Europe. It could have been Romania, but I always come up with Bulgaria. And I was a priest, and I had one nun in that church, and it was my grandmother in this lifetime. And I recognized my grandmother. I always recognized her. I couldn't quite figure out where, but I somehow always knew my grandmother. And I knew her from, I knew it was like beyond this lifetime. And I finally saw in a vision, it made sense to me. I remember seeing her as a nun. She looked exactly the way she looked and in this lifetime. And I remember being her priest. I remember her serving in the church, and her and I talking, being very close. I felt like she was a very, very close friend of mine. And then in this lifetime, I love my grandmother very much, but I always felt more, just like I did in that lifetime, it was a love, friendship, a very close friend. And in this lifetime, that's how I felt about my grandmother. She was just she was my grandmother, but it felt that same exact connection, very close friend. And it's very special. And that's just one example of a lifetime I remember. One other thing, I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. When I was probably 5 or 6 years old, I would be standing outside in my yard. I'd be playing in the yard and everything, and I would just be so happy. And I closed my eyes, and I would see who I called Elephant Man. I just would see him, and I had no idea who he was or anything like that, but I would see just this really strong vision. Kind of looked like you guys know those light bright things. They're starting to get popular again. It looked kind of like that, but it was in the shape of this beautiful being that looked like an elephant, and I just called him Elephant Man. And I remember even coloring at one of my little tables in my house, and I would just be scribbling, and all of a sudden I would kind of go into this like kind of trance state, and I would see for a quick moment this Elephant Man, and I felt very honored. I felt very peaceful and all of that. And again, I had no connection growing up to Catholicism or any other religion. But as a little boy, I was seeing this, and it turns out I learned a few years ago that it was Ganesh. So I saw the Ganesh, and I recognized, oh my God, that's Elephant Man. That's the guy I used to see. And the only way I would have recognized that or known that was not in this lifetime. It was from previous lifetimes when I was in India. And another interesting thing before I conclude, there's a lot of different things I can share about this, but my youngest sister, Danae, she's 4 years younger than me, very psychic, and she had a past life regression done in Columbus, Ohio. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually going to be working in 2 weeks. I'm going to be working at the that same psychic fair in Columbus, Ohio, the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo and celebration is what they call it also. I'm going to be working that Saturday and Sunday in September. And anyways, my sister Danae had a past life regression there several years ago. And what came up for her was she remembered living in India. And it was amazing how she had that experience. And here my experience was only the Ganesh. That's the only thing I can remember from those lifetimes is that Ganesh. I don't know if I'm just not supposed to remember or nothing has come up yet regarding the lives in India. I will say I do come across a lot of Indian people, and I do have a very strong connection to Indian artifacts and the gods and things like that, because it's familiar to me, just like Catholicism is very familiar to me. And so, yeah, just thought I would share a couple of these interesting things that came up. But yeah, so anytime any of you guys get a private session with me, if you want me to look at some information I can see if I can find from your past lives, I'm happy to check into that as well during your session. And I do it virtual, I do it in person, over the phone, all of that. But just let me know. All right, well, if you have any reincarnation stories, feel free to share. And if you guys want me to make another video, maybe a part 2, I do have a couple other stories about reincarnation that are also mind-blowing. But it's very interesting. So anyways, you guys have a great ending of August. I'm making this video on August 29th. It's almost August 30th here in Hawaii. So I will talk to you soon. Thanks, guys. Aloha.